Hey guys, so time for another round of meta-analysis for the month where I basically will go on ranked matches on Dueling Book in watch mode and take note of what players are running and map out the representation among the top ranked players. And before we continue, a big thanks to my sponsors as usual. If you want some 6 sleeves or playmats or binders, feel free to check out my discount codes below. Alright, so this video will look at top 100 ranked players overall, but let's focus on the top 25 for now, and I managed to find 16 players in this pool, so I obviously cannot get everyone since not everyone is on during the times that I'm collecting the data. Anyways, not surprisingly, we see most top ranked players running Tearlaments, but honestly, a really big chunk in 25%, we're still running Spright. Obviously in top cut representation at big events, you will still predominantly see Tears, but at least on Dueling Book, looks like players really like running Spright as well. Then we have Floowandereeze, but at least one player each running rogue strategies such as adding Naturia, which of course is piloted by none other than Vision, as well as Marincess, which I actually did a deck profile with him a while back, just before his Shizu tier format. Despite the presence of the Grave Shufflers, I thought that these decks would not be able to do well competitively, but clearly this proves things wrong, so for those of you who are also a fan of these decks, definitely don't lose hope. Then we have that Zodiac list that I believe was popularized on DB Grinder's channel, so really cool to see that going second build with Shifter having a place even in today's meta, despite the ban of Trident. It can make Zeus really easily of course, and Zoo usually plays a ton of hand traps as well, so something worth trying if you're a fan of rogue decks. Now of course, if we had all players' data available, this pie chart may look different, but I think all in all the representation of the top 3 decks are pretty accurate. On to players ranked between 26 to 50, we again have Tearlaments be the most represented deck at over half, so ironically enough at a bigger representation than what we saw among the top 25, although again this might be different if we had the data of all players available and not a select sample. At second once again is Spright, but this time we do not have any Floowandereeze here, but we do see some Branded Bystial, Naturia Runick, Pure Runick Stun, Salamangreat of all decks, as well as Tri-Brigade Lyrilisk. I think Branded Bystial is a solid tier 2 strategy right now as they do play a lot of Bystials that can help combat tiers, and let's not forget how powerful Branded Fusion is. You can check out my recent profile featuring Porygon P, who is higher ranked on DB with Branded Bystial, and if you're a fan of mid-range decks, this is another option for you. Naturia is also another really interesting deck as it has a good matchup against tiers as it can send those Grave Shufflers easily and have various monster and back row negates as well. I'm in the works of coordinating a deck profile with this player, so let's hope we can bring that to you soon. Bird Up is another interesting deck since it can search DD Crows, which again is useful against Tearlaments. Swordsoul on the other hand is also not bad right now, and you can technically run Shifter in this deck, but it will change its playstyle quite drastically. As for Salad, I think it's in a pretty tough spot right now because the Grave Shufflers are quite detrimental to their strategy, but this deck can turbo out Abyss Dweller quite easily, which is nice. As for players ranked between 51 to 100, I had 33 players data available, and again, we see the top 3 decks being Tears, Spright, and Floowandereeze. A variety of other decks in these ranks such as Dragon Link, Branded Bystial, and Dark World, which was actually piloted by S. Crow, who is usually known for playing Mermails. Another Cybers list among the top ranked players here, not to mention Adventure Plunder Patrol, which is wild and has not seen much competitive play in the last few months. There once again was another Runick Stun and Swordsoul list, and even a Scareclaw list, which I believe just bubbled at the remote YCS as well. Lastly, there was one player running Thunder Dragon Bystials, which sort of had initial competitive potential right after the release of Bystials, but have been quiet since, but looks like at least one player is running it with success. So overall, as you would expect, we have Tears, Spright, and Floowandereeze take up the top spots, but some solid tier 2 decks that you can consider are Branded Bystials, Dragon Link, and even Runick. Now to cover some of the decks in a bit more detail with the help of data from YGOscope.com, firstly among the Tearlaments players in this video, the majority, no surprise, were playing the Shizu variant that we're used to, but a couple Branded Tearlaments and even one Spright Tearlament was in there. In the last 7 days among all players on Dueling Book, it was by far the most played deck online with an insane 63% match win percentage. Now if you watch my monthly tier list by the data videos where I calculate a tier score for each deck based on several factors, you'll know that they have the highest score by far among all decks. This is the tier list that won the remote dual YCS piloted by Christian Urena, and of course, most of Shizu tier lists look pretty much the same, although the interesting choice in this list was the use of Majesty's Fiend in the side deck, which does require a monster to tribute, but if you have your normal summon available, the Majesty's Fiend can prevent monster effects from activating, which is a crazy floodgate. As for Spright, the majority are running it quote-unquote pure, with the minority running it with the Adventure engine. After Tearlaments, it was the second most played deck with an equally impressive 62% match win percentage among all players. Really strong deck, and it's a lot easier to pilot than Tears, so if you're sick of playing Tearlaments, maybe take a break and play this deck if you still want to have a good chance competitively. As for a sample deck list, this was piloted by Kenny Nguyen, who finished top 32 at the remote dual YCS, and basically Spright can play a ton of hand traps and still have insane consistency, and it can technically play under Shifter for that tier matchup, so you typically see those in the side. As for Flunder, another deck with a pretty crazy 60% win percentage among all players online, and it's consistently the third most played deck online in the last couple months. This was the deck list that finished second place at Remote YCS, piloted by Caesar, and so the Flunder lists are also pretty standard, and you tend to see the main decking evenly matched nowadays to have a chance at winning if they lose a die roll. Then another deck worth highlighting is Runick, which for the most part has been used as an engine for Spright, but now the pure stun variant is back despite the ban of Mystic Mine. I couldn't calculate a tier score for this one because I could not really distinguish whether the data was for pure Runick or other Runick variants, but needless to say, the package is played a lot on DB right now. There were a couple Runick lists that topped the Remote YCS, and this was one of them by Kyler Price, and as you can see, it's got a ton of floodgates, and Messenger of Peace is now the new Mystic Mine, where it prevents monsters with attack higher than 1500 from attacking. Not the most fun deck to go up against, but looks like we have not seen the end of competitive stall strategies. And lastly, we have Branded Bystial, which I already provided some commentary earlier in the video. While Branded Despia may not be a tier 1 deck anymore, any kind of branded variant is still seeing a lot of play online on Dueling Book, although their win percentage of 51% is definitely not in the same league as the top 3 decks like Tears, Spright, or Flunder. As mentioned before, I recently did do a deck profile with Porygon P, who is ranked high on DB with Branded Bystial, so definitely make sure to check that out if you're interested in learning how to play the deck. Alright guys, so that was it for this month's meta-analysis. Let me know how you feel about these kind of videos so that I know if they're worth creating every month. As always, a big thanks to my Patreons, Eileen Dice Queen, Bolt Spider, Cybernetic, Brandon Jaren, Barrelord, Spooky Boogie, Stephen Phillips, and Chaz Blanks, as always, for supporting the channel. You guys are awesome. If you're interested in joining my Patreon, link down below. Take care guys.